Hey, have you ever seen Apocalypse Now? Well, if your dingus looks like a sweaty Colonel Kurtz nestled deep in a heavy, humid jungle, preaching to village kids while being stalked by an army assassin, then you need help. Or, if it just looks like a baby bird sitting in a messy nest, waiting for its two siblings to hatch, you got to do something about that. And one of our sponsors of this episode and this podcast is manscaped.com, and they have just the thing you need in your life to help take control of the situation down below. Go check them out at manscaped.com. They got this razor called the Lawnmower 3.0. Now, the Lawnmower 3.0 has been developed over years using scientific methods to come up with the best razor in the industry to help, clean up the nether regions on a dude without, bursting the sack, if you know what I mean. So the blades on it are a ceramic composite type of material, and you can go down there and shave away, and there's no nicks, cuts, scratches, or any issues whatsoever. They also have a lot of products to help things clean and keep things clean and fresh down there. Whether it's a ball toner or like a deodorant for down there, or like anti-chafing type of things and whatnot. So check them out at manscaped.com. They have all kinds of they got some package deals and stuff going on that are discounted, and I highly recommend it. They sent me a razor a while back. I've been using it, and it's been giving me a way more pleasant summer and humid summer experience. Check them out, manscaped.com. Use the promo code BIGTRUTH at checkout. Once again, promo code is BIGTRUTH, BIGTRUTH. And you will get 20% off your order and free shipping. So even on things like those ultimate packages that are already going on there, they're already discounted. You get 20% off that. So use Big Truth at checkout for 20% off your order. And if you're into motorcycles, and if you're into choppers and riding motorbikes and whatnot, you should check out chopcult.com. Chopcult.com is the industry's biggest kind of message board and news resource and online forum for the chopper and motorcycle communities. They got a ton of information there, a ton of forums. They have information on upcoming events. They even have a online swap meet section, so you can find, sell, and barter motorcycle parts. And the best thing about it all is membership is free. So check them out at www.chopcult.com and on all the social medias, simply at chopcult. And if you're looking for some new clothes to be flaunting around with this summer, check out amertamia.com. Amerta is a streetwear brand, and that is backed by a code of ethics and something that society needs right now. So check them out at www.omertamia.com. They got t-shirts, hoodies, jackets, socks. They even sell pomades and screen prints and things like that. So there's a ton of shit to check out there. And if you use the promo code BIGTRUTH at checkout, you will also get 20% off your order there. So check them out, omertamia.com, and on all the social media, simply at omertamia, which is OMERTAMIA.com. I know I got a masshole accent, so I like to spell things out because, you know what I mean? I just, whatever you call it, I'm a pretty thoughtful type of guy. I don't know what the word is. And what else? You want to check out Pitchfork, which is a clothing company, Pitchfork Hardware. You probably heard of them through the years. They are big in the hardcore metal and punk rock scenes, especially. Pitchforkny.com, short for Pitchfork New York, or on all the social medias, also at pitchforkny.com. They also have a record label, so all kinds of clothing, all kinds of apparel. I know they just started doing some more coaches jackets and all kinds of cool shit like that. So check them out and pick up all the records. They're highly collectible, colored vinyl, limited edition records. Pitchforkny.com. And what else? Chopperhead.com, which is the website for my motorcycle shop. And we are a brick and mortar shop. So you come in, if you are in the New England area, stop on by and come on in. We're on County Road in Freetown, Massachusetts. And if you are not in the area, then you check us out at chopperhead.com, which is CHOPPAHEAD. We're a full-service motorcycle shop. We do everything from an oil change to build you a full custom chopper. The whole litany of services, service, repair, speed work, upgrades, engine upgrades, audio upgrades, custom fabrication, paint, whatever. We got it. We do it. Also parts. We have some stuff online, and whatever you don't see online, if there's something you're looking for, give us a shout. We're set up with everyone. You want a thunderheader for your dyno? We got you. You want some Paco pipes for your old panhead? We got you. You know what I mean? Everything in between. Tuners, fucking top end kits, gaskets, all kinds of shit. Check us out, www.chopperhead.com. And if you haven't already, check out the Big Truth Podcast website, which is bigtruthpodcast.com. We got all kinds of, we got every episode up over there, so you can scroll through and peruse if you haven't already, or if you don't listen to it on on your favorite player. And we're going to have more features up on there, more giveaways and everything like that. And I just got a bunch of records this weekend for my boy. Sorry, I just had a little bit of acid reflux there. But my boy Cannibal Mac gave me a bunch of records from Murderer's Row, especially some on limited color beer vinyl. It's a beer colored vinyl with a little frosty header on there. And if you don't know Murderer's Row, it's a good oi band, oi punk hardcore band that you should check out. I got a bunch of CDs. I got a bunch of vinyl. Those will be going into the prize packs and mystery boxes and everything. So check it out, bigtruthpodcast.com. Please subscribe and spread the word, and leave some feedback. That'll greatly help. And now we're going to get into today's episode.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Yes. Once again, we have liftoff. I want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Big Truth Podcast. And today I'm stoked to announce that I got my brother here, Coach Tye Tonkin from Sanda Fighting Arts.
What it do? What's going on?
What's happening, man?
Not much. Just sitting here in Freetown, doing a podcast with you.
So this is actually the first one that I broadcasted from my house. Like I'm watching my dogs, and so you might hear a little bit of dog foolishness going on in the background at some point.
Tomfoolery. In the background.
Especially if we hit any of the horn sound effects.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, man. So what's happening, dude? Like, Tye, if you're unfamiliar, my boy Tye here is got a gym, and he just opened up right during the pandemic.
Yeah, great time to start a new business and try to get things going during a worldwide pandemic. But so I am the owner and head coach of Sanda Fighting Arts in Watertown, Massachusetts, so right outside of Boston. We just opened our doors to the facility in July, so we just the last 2 months as we've been open officially.
Yeah.
But we've been running the program for a couple of years, the Sanda Fighting Arts program, but we just, after years of searching for a facility and like putting together our program and our curriculum and building up our following and stuff like that, we got a building in Watertown that was just like a really perfect fit. And when we initially got it, I think we actually signed the lease in October of 2019, and we had to wait for some build out to get the facility like ready for us to actually move in on the landlord's end of things. Yeah. And so we were planning on having like a March open. That was our goal. They were looking at having build out done they said January, so I assumed February, and then they said maybe February, so I assumed March or April.
Yeah.
But then obviously the pandemic hit, and like the build out on their end closed off. They couldn't finish, so I could start building out some of my stuff in there, but we weren't actually fully in the building until the end, or the like kind of the middle of June, and then we opened our doors July 1st. Or I think it was actually like July 6th or whatever, whenever like the phase 3 happened for us. And and I'm just trying to get that going in sort of this awkward time, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, man. But so for people that might be unfamiliar, before we even get into the story of your dojo, I'm just kidding, and the story of the gym, like, I know it's starting to get some momentum within MMA and whatnot, but can you for people that are unfamiliar, give a little brief background of what Sanda is and
Sure.
and kind of go through that?
Sure. Yeah. So like the primary art that we teach in Sanda Fighting Arts is Chinese kickboxing, essentially. And it derives from like traditional Kung Fu. But it's like the combat sport variation that comes from China that's like taught to the military and practice for sport. And the style itself, it's very conducive to MMA. Like it's very similar. But basically when I describe it to people, because everybody that comes in like, all right, what's this? It's different. And like, how do you describe it? It's a lot like Muay Thai in that it's kicking, striking. You can throw knees and you can throw some elbows in like the pro leagues. Just like kind of depends on like what tournament or competition that you're in, what kind of fight you're getting. And then the thing that really differentiates it is there's a lot more of like emphasis on wrestling. So there's throws and takedowns. You can shoot in and grab somebody's legs. You can pick them right up off the mat and throw them down. Whereas like you can do some sweeps and like there's some like clinch work and other kickboxing styles. But there's a much bigger emphasis on those throws and takedowns. So it's very similar to MMA in that way, where like, you can grab someone's legs or you can pick them up off the canvas and slam them down. Traditionally, it's done on, it's called a liei tai, which is basically like a boxing ring with no ropes. So you can like throw motherfuckers right out the ring. And that's like a strategy, is to try to pick people up and toss them out of the ring. So if you can get that a couple of times, you win. And like way back in the day,
Is it like if you do it a certain number of times, you automatically win by default, or is it just because, or is it like, or also you're just breaking their fucking spirit and,
I mean, a little
backs and stuff getting tossed off a ring? Is it a high up ring?
So it isn't now. Now it's just a couple of feet. But what I'm saying is like back in the day, like the real shit, back in the day, you could do like fights on a liei tai that was 40 feet up. You could throw people off to their death. There's a Jet Li movie, Unbreakable or something like that, where he plays a historical figure, Hurin Jia, I think. And like they have to have like death matches, right? Like they like sign a death waiver and like have to do it with their blood or some fucking cinematic thing. And then they have to like climb up onto this platform. And that's what it used to be back in the days. Like you could have these really high platforms. So
what's back in the day?
Hundreds of years ago.
Okay, so not like 1974.
No, like 72. No, I'm just kidding. No, like hundreds of years ago. Like, things were a little bit back when you could like publicly have death matches and like that was okay. But it kind of comes from
back
that.
before cancel culture.
Yeah, exactly. It was okay to throw people off to their death, and you weren't going to have an issue. That actually probably would get you like students going into your school at that point or something like that, right? As if you won. Given like this, I'm talking about a movie, but it's based off of like real things. Like you would hang all your like death certificates. Like I understand I might die, and you like might hang that at your school, but. So the combat sport now for Sanda is...
You should probably hang some up in your gym and really freak people out when they come in.
Just so I could catch up and make it look like it's my blood. So now it's done on a liei tai that's lower down onto the ground, but not having that barrier is something that like the style is a little more unique for, because you can push somebody off of that edge. And if you do it 3 times, you can just win the match that way. Because again, like... theoretically, if it was really high up, or you might throw somebody to their death.
Done.
Now there's like pads and stuff because you have to like compete a lot. And like in China, you'll see the competitions are like bracketed. They're like tournament style. So you might fight 3 or 4 or 5 times in the weekend, depending on how many people are in your weight class. But then there are some leagues that are like any other like fight promotion where it's 2 people, you know, a scheduled match. So there's like a couple different variations on how they do it. And sometimes you see it also spelled Sanshou, Sanshou, and it's the same thing. Everyone wants to ask like, oh, what's the difference between Sanshou and Sanda? Sanshou just means like random hands, and Sanda means like randomly striking. It's just like the term. But yeah, so it's a traditional Chinese kickboxing. And we also do Shuai Jiao, which is the wrestling. It's a jacketed wrestling style. So you wear a jacket that is short sleeve instead of like, it's kind of like a judo gi or jacket, but it's short sleeve. And you can grab onto the jacket and you try to throw somebody down. And it's similar in the takedowns. Like you can grab someone's legs in Shuai Jiao. You can grab anywhere on the jacket. There's not as many rules as like some other styles of martial arts like that. Like judo is a very similar art. But like I said, less rules. You can kind of grab anything and you just try to throw somebody down. So those are the 2 main styles that we teach. Sanda is like our striking art, our kickboxing, and Shuai Jiao is our wrestling. The biggest difference in like those styles to like MMA is there's no real ground fighting. So once you go down, if you pick someone up, if you throw them, if you sweep them, once you hit the mat, they get you back up and you'll get like a certain number of like points or like a lead in the fight, depending on how clean those takedowns were, but they don't let you fight on the ground normally. Sure. There's some promotions that are starting like what's called Ultimate Sanda, and it's essentially MMA. It's striking
in China or
no, in I mean other parts of the world, but in the US too, there's a couple, like there's one in New York. And the way that they do like the Ultimate Sanda, I think just to try to like get that MMA crowd in a little bit more into, because it's not very popular here. It was like getting kind of popular in the like late 90s, early 2000s. It looked like Sanda was going to pop off. And then like the UFC came in and MMA got really popular and the money kind of ran out in the promotions and it faded out. But now they're like trying to bring it back up a little bit with this Ultimate Sanda, so to speak, which is all the same stuff, but you can fight with like 4-ounce gloves, something smaller, and you can continue to like fight on the ground and go for a submission for I think 15 seconds. But if it doesn't look like there's an end in 15 seconds, they get you back up. It's a really fast-paced sport, so like you're supposed to have action at least every 5 seconds. Like that's part of the rule set for Sanda. It's something else that like makes it a little bit different, because they want that constant action. It's really, really fast. So they don't just let you like stay on the ground and kind of wait it out into the end of the round, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But there's only a few places that are starting to do those rule sets.
So just a quick question, because given that it's a striking art, but also a takedown art, and given that MMA is both either a striking game or a ground game, this seems like to be a good intermediary art, like to be able to like take it, you know, from the, you know, especially if someone's like a more capable on the ground than they are, you know, it seems like this would be something that's more popular within like MMA or UFC, because it's like a good kind of middle ground where like it has a more of a focus than kickboxing on actually getting people on the ground. So like it seems like something that'd be useful for someone who's like all right at striking, but wants to be able to have more takedown options to get someone on the ground where they might be more proficient.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's what I think. That's my sell, right? Is like this is a more conducive art if you're looking to get into MMA than, you know, what's really popular right now for like striking is either boxing or Muay Thai. But because in MMA you have that wrestling and ground fighting element, right? You would maybe stand different, or your like what you do, sort of like your tactics in fighting would be a little bit different because you got to worry about that takedown. That's why you don't see a lot of really like strong Muay Thai fighters in MMA, whether it's UFC or any other, you know, sort of
glory, whatever,
anything like that. So it's that's, like I said, like that's definitely my sell for it. Is it works really, really well because there's a big emphasis on root. like your connection to the ground and not getting taken down,
Yeah.
because that scores really well in Sanda. So like if you take someone down, you can get a lot of points for that. Basically, it was like makes it so that you could win that round.
Yeah.
And it gives you sort of the skill sets to go from stand up to the ground. And then if you have a really solid ground game, you know, you're practicing some BJJ, you're good with your submissions and your movement there. It's perfect. It's really, really good for it.
Yeah.
So like we teach like a Sanda for MMA class that doesn't teach a lot of like submissions on the ground. It's more like good defense for ground fighting. So like if someone's trying to bring you to ground, what do we do to try to get back up? Because our primary is going to be for striking. Like that's where that art is going to do the best. But it's a really, really good complement for anyone that's getting into MMA. So I like can't recommend it enough for people that are interested in that. And like, that's kind of our take. Like our big thing is trying to modernize Sanda a little bit and make it a little bit more, I guess, like marketable for the masses today. Because they're seeing more like MMA and combat sport, and kickboxing in general is starting to get popular again. Like Glory and stuff like that is really still getting more and more popular. Muay Thai is getting more popular, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is getting more popular. So you're seeing these like arts kind of come back a little bit because of like just the influx and what's happening in MMA and in the UFC and stuff like that. So I think there's a place for it. Like I said, it was pretty popular like in the 90s and early 2000s, but we didn't have very good representation. We were still like some of the only people that really did it. Like Kung Lee is a former Strikeforce champion and a UFC fighter, and he had a Sanda background. He also had like a Taekwondo and some wrestling. Like but his main style that he was bringing in, he's an undefeated Sanda champion. And he was probably our biggest representation. And I actually work with him. He's my coach for Sanda and MMA. And he probably made like the biggest noise in that world. But we're starting to see more Sanda fighters come out, but just recently, like, Song Wei Li is, the women's strawweight champion, belt holder right now. And she has a traditional background and a Sanda and Shuai Jiao background. And she like pushes and promotes that pretty hard. So like people are starting to hear that name a little bit more, Sanda, like, and kind of starting to get a little more interested in it. And there's a couple other guys in the UFC that are doing it. Muslim, I forget his last name, something with an S, and then Zabit, and I won't even try to. The guys from Russia, like I won't even try to say his last name, but there's like a little outside of the U.S. Sanda is actually very big. It's one of the biggest combat sports in the world, but it's just here in the U.S. we don't have really good representation for it, and we don't have a lot of good coaches or schools gyms that are teaching it. And a lot of that comes from it kind of being tied into a lot of the traditional martial arts. So like traditional Kung Fu and Tai Chi. And those are not really attracting the kinds of people that want to compete and really test that stuff. So we have sort of a really low level of combat sport in the traditional martial arts, which is unfortunate. So it's starting to get a little more popular. Like Sanda as a style is starting to get a little more popular now that there's like a few people in the UFC. Because right now that's like where all the light is, right? Everybody's watching that promotion. And so if it's not happening there, you don't really know about it because they're like the biggest voice in combat sport right now for the US.
Yeah.
They're not in the world, but for the US, they certainly are. So now that we're getting some better representation with people that have that background, it's starting to become a little bit more popular. So I'm hoping that this gym kind of takes off because we have something that's super applicable, but it's a little more rare. You don't see as often. And it works really, really well for a lot of combat sport, whether it's just kickboxing or if it's MMA, or if you're interested in getting into Sanda specifically. In this area in particular, we're basically the only gym that does these arts in like the Boston area and even in Massachusetts. There's like some maybe like in some of like I said, some of the traditional schools, but like a full on combat sport gym that's teaching Sanda and Shuai Jiao is pretty rare. So that's kind of our niche. We have something that other people don't that still works with other styles.
Sure. But it would seem like, more people would want to get on it be like early adopters of it, because like if you know the style and people are used to fighting someone more, with it's like, especially in an MMA thing, they're used to the movements of more like maybe traditional kickboxing or Muay Thai or whatever when it's striking stuff. If you come with some new shit, you can be, you know what I mean? That should feel like that should give you an edge. And why do you think that it didn't catch on as big here as it did in other places in the world? If you know what I mean? You got guys from Russia and all over the place that are bringing it into like, a more MMA thing. Why do you think America's such like late adopters of it?
Well, part of it is honestly like the promotions that we had, like some of the organizations that were putting on Sanda fights, like I said, in the 90s and stuff, the money ran out.
Okay.
And so they, kind of got absorbed into other like K1 kickboxing and stuff like that. And like some other like big promotions used to do like kickboxing under Sanda rules. And then as like some of that money went away, they had to pare down their promotions. They would do less of those and more of what was still kind of kicking around, like K1 kickboxing and Muay Thai and stuff like that. And the other thing is just like we don't have a ton of good coaches for this style. Like it wasn't so popular here that there was a Sanda gym in every town. Like in the 70s and 80s, like karate just blew up, and there was a karate gym in every single town in America, So we didn't have a lot of good representation. We didn't have a lot of good coaches. Like I said, a lot of traditional martial artists that do the traditional styles of like Kung Fu would do a little bit of Sanda, but they're not as practiced. So they don't really pressure test their stuff as much. Like they might do a little like sparring in class, but you don't have a ton of gyms and a ton of guys that are, and girls, ladies, people of any kind that are really training it to a high level. Sure. So like if you want to be, a top tier athlete in a combat sport, you got to train all the time. You got to be super, super serious. And we just didn't really have that. So like as like the skill level in fighting and combat sport in general started getting up a little bit higher, we had a lot more of a shallow pool to pull from. And so we didn't do that well. Even though the style itself, if it's trained properly, is a great fit for those other kickboxing styles, MMA, whatever it may be. You need to have good facilities and good coaches that are teaching it, and find the right people to be able to, train and really dedicate themselves to getting up there. So that's what we're trying to do now.
Yeah, sure. Now, how did you come to find your way into this? Like, especially given that it's not one of the more popular type of arts right now. Like, like everyone's heard Muay Thai. Everyone's just, knows kickboxing or, knows Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or all that. Sure. You know what I mean? Most people on the street can, if you said those three things, they would know what it is. If you say Sanda, like, it's going to be much less. So how did you find your way into it? And I know you had a little bit of some crazy training background and stuff, so we can get into that as well.
Yeah, sure.
But how did you kind of even find your way into it?
So, I mean, it was totally luck of the draw for me. I initially, like as a kid, like a lot of people, I think almost anybody that is still in the industry, or just a ton of people in general, like we all started in like Kenpo Karate. When I was a little kid, I started in Kenpo Karate. My parents were like, all right, you're fucking insane. You don't like sports, and you have too much energy, and we got to get you into something. We're putting you in a karate class. And I didn't love it, but whatever. I was like 5 or 4 at the time when I first started, and I did it for years, and I like went up and got my like junior black belt in it. And when I did that, then I was like, I want to take a little break. And so I took a break maybe for a couple of years. I think I was like 11. I got back into it when I was like 12 or 13. And the school that I used to go to when I was doing karate, like closed and moved, and I didn't know. So I was like, oh, well, shit, I can't go back there. So I'll find something else. And I grabbed the yellow pages. This is back when you found things in the fucking yellow pages. And I just like scrolled through, and I think I called like 5 or 6 things in the town that I lived in. And the only place that called me back was Averill's Martial Arts Academy in Concord, New Hampshire. And I wanted to go check it out because they listed Aikido specifically. And I didn't know anything about any of these styles. I was just a little kid, and like Aikido sounded cool. Like when I said it, like I thought it. Like I didn't know anything about this.
I didn't know if you knew just where it was if Steven Seagal was ringing a bell or something. If that's what. That
I wasn't even into. I wasn't into martial arts like that yet at this time. I just was like, all right, I'm going to try something else. And Aikido sounds cool. Like Jiu-Jitsu sounds cool. Like, and like Kung Fu is what I started doing, but it sounded goofy to me. But like. I went in and they were like, oh yeah, there's Aikido classes, but it's like just some guy that like rents the space occasionally. And like, so they only have like 1 or 2 classes a week. They're like, oh, but there's a Kung Fu class if you want to try that out. And I was like, I don't know. It sounds a little weird, but I remember I was a kid, there was weapons on the wall, swords and big knives and things like that. And I was like, oh, do they use that in Aikido? And they're like, no, that's for the Kung Fu. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll try this shit out. So I tried that class out and I fell in love with it. First class, I absolutely fell in love with everything that they were doing in the class. It was super cool to me. And I literally took every class they offered from that day on. Like I was instantly in. And it just so happened that like they taught like traditional Kung Fu and Tai Chi, but they also taught boxing and kickboxing. So I probably did just the traditional stuff on just doing traditional Kung Fu for maybe 4 months, and I was like super into it. And my first coach, Paul Averill, was like, "Oh, you should really try to do the Sanda, or you should try to do the kickboxing. Like, it's going to be the application of all the stuff you do in Kung Fu." So I started doing that. Like anything my coach said, I was like, "Of course, I'm going to do that. Right? That's your teacher." And so I got into it super young, just by chance going into the right school. It was like the only school teaching any of like Chinese martial arts in that area for the longest time. It was just like a total fluke thing that like they were the ones that called me back, and like I was trying to get into some other art and I just kind of backed into traditional Chinese martial arts, and I got really into it and wanted to really be able to do it. So I started doing the combat sport, kickboxing and stuff like that really soon on. And then I just trained every single day. I trained in both the like traditional stuff and the more modern fighting sports. And that's kind of what kept me in it, was just like, that was my only option living in, little Concord, New Hampshire. And just being like totally in love with Chinese martial arts in general. And so I kept going with it. And, as I got a little bit older, I started moving around, but I was always looking for places that did kind of rare stuff in general, just because I got into things that weren't popular. Because again, like you said, like there's BJJ started getting really popular. It was everywhere. Muay Thai gets really popular. Every kickboxing school now does Muay Thai, or just boxing, straight boxing. So the school now, Averill's Martial Arts, no longer teaches the traditional stuff. They're just a kickboxing and boxing school, and they're a great gym. I mean, there's like a application or something, like a wait list, I think, and those guys are killing it. It was just a really, really good gym. I just lucked out to have a really good coach that kind of put me on that path, and I was like 14, 15 years old, and I was like, I want to be a martial arts instructor. And they were like, oh, if you really want to do that, you got to like really, really commit. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And that's what I've wanted to do ever since I was a young teen. And now here I am now, like,
cool.
Opening up my own gym and teaching kind of this rare stuff.
Yeah. And then where did you go from there?
So I started training, like I said, in Concord. And then I got my black belt from that school. And I remember...
And that's in Sanda?
In traditional Kung Fu and Tai Chi. And they didn't have like a ranking system for...
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any...
Some schools do.
Yeah.
There's not like any formal rank.
Yeah.
Some schools will make that. Like I have like a testing curriculum myself for Sanda, but like it's not super common. Okay. But usually if it's like traditional stuff, they have like a belt or a sash system.
Yeah.
And I did both. So I was still like testing through that. And when I
was any particular style of Kung Fu or?
Yeah. So we did Cheng Chuan, which was long fists and northern style, and northern eagle claw, which is another pretty common style. And I still train long fist today. So one of my teachers was Dr. Yang Jwing-Ming, and he ran a school or runs a school or an organization, Yang's Martial Arts Association, YMAA. And when I was a kid going through all this stuff, I would always hear about him and about all the stuff that they do. And one of the big things, like one of my specialties is something called China. China is like joint locking, but like stand up. It's not like groundwork. And I loved that class. And I always remember my teacher being like, if you ever get a chance, go down to Boston. That's where their headquarters school is, and train with YMAA. Cause like, that's where my teacher is. Like it's really, really good stuff. And so, I think something that really shows a good coach is my teacher saying like, you reach this point and I can keep training you, and we can keep doing stuff and keep developing. But if you really want to go further with the joint locks and your traditional stuff, your Kung Fu, your Tai Chi, you should go train with someone else, train with my teachers, because they can bring you even further. And that says a lot, because there's a lot of like ego in martial arts, and there's a lot of coaches or teachers or sifus or senseis or whatever you want to call yourself that will purposely kind of keep their students back to make them look like they're, oh, I've got all this skill, and you're always going to be lower than me. But like a good coach should always want your students to be better than you and evolve and get, even better material so that they can pass that on. And that's how the arts grew.
It's like anything, like, even any sport, like, just evolves. So if you get someone, if you're a teacher and you get your students to go past you, it's not just that, like, if you put your ego aside and be like, all right, now this whole thing just evolved more.
Exactly.
Whether it's the sport itself or this particular person or whatever, but it's still, you're part of that lineage, and the teacher's part of that lineage, and it's about putting everything forward.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how it should be. That's how it was when a lot of these old styles were developed, right? It was like, make your students better than you, and then they're going to teach and add on to it.
Yeah.
And their students will be even better, and they'll add on to it.
Yeah.
But you see it all the time. Like, traditional martial arts has started to go back. Like, you don't learn everything from your teacher. Now you're now teaching, but you only got 3/4 of what they had because they didn't want to give you a little bit more or anything like that. And then you start teaching half of what they had, and then their students start teaching half of what they had, and it gets really watered down. And that's why, like, a lot of traditional martial arts right now could just kind of get shit on, because there's a lot of fancy movements, and there's not a lot of pressure testing, and people don't have the real roots of what they're learning.
Yeah. And no one's getting thrown off 30-foot platforms anymore.
The necessity for some of those arts is no longer there. Because we're just not, fighting as much openly and stuff like that. And like a lot of the styles for traditional Chinese martial arts in particular, you got to remember they're warring styles. Like they're styles that were teaching people how to go like out on the field and kill each other, right?
Yeah.
And take over lands and stuff like that. And there was weapons and there was, armor. It was a different time. And so as some of that stuff goes away, like the arts become a little bit of a relic that aren't as applicable as maybe they once were. I think there's still something to it. Like, you should still practice and kind of like respect what they had. But if you're not changing it, if you're not modernizing it to a certain extent, you're going to get left behind just as a style. And so for like myself, I feel like maybe it's because my teacher was also taught more combat sport, boxing and kickboxing. So that like need to get better just as an athlete and as a fighter was there. And like that want to make your students better was there. And so my coach told me like, go find these people. They're going to make your stuff even better. So I really started traveling down sort of the traditional path a little bit more. Like, I can still remember I got an email from him, and I think at this time I was living in Philadelphia. I lived there for a couple of years, and he was like, Master Yang, who's now my traditional teacher, he's like, is opening a facility out in California, out in the mountains. It's a full-time training facility. I think you should do this program where basically a handful of people get selected and go out and train for 10 years straight with this master, like out in the mountains. It's like a movie, and like really learn all the traditional stuff. but that was enough to get me like, okay, I got to go check out what's going on with this school. Like I said, my teacher had always told me about them and about the organization YMAA and everything. And so I started going down, I started traveling to Boston to check out like seminars and stuff with this organization. And so I did some seminars. I did some of the chin-na, the joint locking, and I fell in love with it. I was like, wow, these guys really, really have it. So for like traditional stuff, I felt like that school was one of the only ones that was like really in the US that were like really training hard, like really good conditioning. Their guys were in really excellent shape. And it wasn't just like flowery movements. It wasn't a lot of like pretty kung fu. It was a lot more traditional. It was a lot more like skill based. And I was like, oh, I get it. This is why they told me to go train. And so I started training like every weekend. I was down here and I would
Coming from Philly.
I think I after I started coming for the first couple of months, at that point I moved around a little bit in my life. Yeah. I moved to Vermont, kind of up near Burlington. I was like outside of Burlington, but I was like living out in the woods, and I started going down pretty much every weekend. There was a seminar or a workshop or something for Saturday, Sunday. So I started coming down. I took every workshop, Saturday, Sunday, go back up, Saturday, Sunday, go back up. And then, you kind of get to know everybody. Everybody's training really hard. They're like, oh, if you want, you can stay another night and take the morning class on Monday and then go back up. I was like, okay, I'll start doing that. So I came down Saturday, Sunday, took classes, took seminars, workshops, whatever they were offering, and then stuck around for Monday. And then I was like, hey, if you want to come down a little early on a Friday, you can take the Friday evening classes, then take the workshops, take the Monday morning class, and then go back up. I was like, okay, I'll start doing that. So I came down Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And I was doing that literally almost every weekend. That's a long drive. And I was like, geez, this stuff is worth it. This stuff is worth coming down and learning, because they really had it. For the traditional stuff, traditional Kung Fu, Tai Chi, and they did long fist, Cheng Chuan, one of the styles I did. So I picked it up really fast from that. And then they did Southern White Crane. It's kind of one of the specialties. It's what my traditional teacher, Dr. Yang Jungming, it's what he's like really well known for. And I really fell in love with that, because it was just like some crazy body mechanics and like really, really cool concepts that went so deep in the traditional stuff. And I was like, this just, everything out of this just supports what I do for all the different styles, or like the fighting that I do, just makes it that much better. And so I started going with them every weekend, training, learning more stuff, going back up to Vermont. I had opened like a little training center myself up there, Tonkin's Martial Arts in Essex. And so I had a little training group that I was running, like a little school up there, and then bringing students down with me every weekend, going back up, training the stuff that they did. And that's how I got kind of hooked up with that organization and started just training classes and stuff with them. And then at some point, the president, who is Master Yang's son, was like, oh, my dad's coming. He's going to be doing some seminars and stuff like that. Wants to meet you, because I was interested in going out to that training facility in California. So he came, he was doing seminars. I was like helping clean the building, and like they were like redoing their basement or something. I was like doing work for them basically, and taking all these classes and stuff. And I met him, and I'll never forget it. First time I ever met him, he shook my hand and he locked me up. He like pulled my pinky back, and I was like, my whole body was seized up. And he looked at my hand. He's like, oh, let me read your palm. Maybe you can do Kung Fu. Maybe you can't. And he like looked at it and he's like, maybe, let's see. Maybe you come out to California. We'll see how you do. And so then I ended up flying out there with him and started training at the YMAA Retreat Center, which is a full-time training facility out there. And they had, at the time, they had started, like I said, a 10-year training program. And a handful of people went out. They were going to train and live there for 10 years and learn what like this old master has to offer for like real good traditional Chinese martial arts. And big group, I can't even remember how many started it. And like within the first year, like 75% of them quit, because it was either too hard or too difficult to like live out there kind of in isolation. It's kind of like, again, like movies. It's like what you would see like the Shaolin monks do in a movie or something. Like you're isolated, you're training from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. and like that you're away from everybody. You're like stuck looking at the same 10 faces every single day, and there's no days off. There's no, I'm tired, I'm sore, I'm going to take a break. It's, you figure out a way to just keep training. And I loved it. It's like Kung Fu Disneyland. Like you go out there, you're out in the mountains, you're running around on stumps and logs and flipping stones and bricks and running up and down a mountain and, you know, practicing traditional sword fighting and spears and stuff like that with like the mist coming over the mountain. And it's crazy. And I was hooked. And so I started going out there for like a couple months at a time, you know, 4 to 8 weeks at a time, and just training with them, coming back and working just to get enough money to get back out there and keep training. And I started doing that for a handful of years, just trying to get further and further into the traditional stuff. And I was still, you know, practicing all the combat sport and all the Sanda, the kickboxing and stuff like that. But I was trying to get the roots of where all that came from a little bit more by going down sort of that path, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how long did you end up training in the mountains? I mean, I know it was, you know, sporadic, like coming back and forth a few months at a time. You didn't do the 10-year thing, did you?
I didn't do the full 10 years. So I wasn't able, I didn't have the means to stay out there the whole time. So
yeah, because it's crazy because it's what year was that?
Oh, Jesus. 2000 and
roughly, yeah.
No, 2000 and must have been 2012 or something. I started going out there, I think.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy just because, like, yeah, you'd still be out there now if you're doing the 10-year thing.
So they had been going for a couple of years when I started. So the 10-year program, I think, ended last year.
Yeah.
Halfway through, they did like a 5-year program, and I had been going out before that. So because again, like most of them quit, most of the people that went out there to try to do this program quit because it's difficult.
And what I was going to say is that just in modern times, it's hard to give up everything and just go live in a mountain for 10 years. And like, because there's still things that follow you, like, you know, money wise, like, you know, and it's like, unless you're super independently wealthy, like not many people can just renounce everything and go in the mountains for 10 years, you know?
Yeah, it's difficult. And, you know, everybody says like, oh, if I could just like go out to the mountains and disappear, I would totally do it. No, you wouldn't. You say that, but you want your cell phone, you want your Facebook. It's really hard to disconnect. It is the single hardest thing being out there I've ever done physically and mentally together. Because again, you're out there, you don't have like easy access to a computer. You can like get on maybe once or twice a week, and there's like really limited internet. So you can like check a couple emails and then that's it. You're not streaming videos or anything like that. And you like confront all your like insecurities and weaknesses and stuff like that while you're out there. Like you get lazy and your brain tells you like, oh, I want to stop, or I want to just like take a break, but you just don't have that option if you're out there and you're training. And basically you're either there doing it, and if you don't want to do it, you leave. And that's why like most people said that they wanted to do that. And then once the program started and the reality hit that like, oh shit, I'm just going to be doing this over and over again to really get that skill, not just like learn a movement and then I can like do it. Like you have to actually be able to do the stuff you say you can. Takes so much practice and so much just over and over of doing that same thing, repetition. And that's hard. That's super hard mentally when you know you have to get up and do the same thing again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Especially
when it's also like carting rocks around or like whatever, jumping on stumps or whatever.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's like, again, and physically it's stuff, it's freaking, it's like boot camp. So I remember the first time I went out there, and I'm crazy. So like, I loved it. But like, I remember waking up after the first couple of days and you sleep like on a mat on the floor in this big open room. Like there's not like, you don't get like a nice bed or anything. Yeah. And I remember being like, oh shit, I can't get up. Like my abs won't let me sit myself up. My arms are like so dead that I'm having a hard time pushing myself and my legs are just so wobbly. And I remember being like, fuck, I don't know what I'm going to do. How am I going to get up? I'm supposed to train today. I'm only like 3 days in. It's like my first time, but I loved it. I was like, that's so crazy how like challenging this is. And I had to like roll over onto my side and like get a stick and like jam it into like the corner of the room so I could like kind of push up and get my knees under me and like stand up. And that's when I was like, yeah, all right, I'm in the right place.
Yeah,
this is the kind of stuff I want. If I'm going to do like the real traditional stuff, this is the kind of training you need. And given I was only there for a couple of months out of the year, there were people that were like trying to live there full time. And, you know, not many of them made it. So halfway through, they had to recruit another group of people. Only half of those folks made it. And then I think at the last 3 years, they did like a limited 3-year program. So I went out and like I said, I stayed for a little bit and left, stayed for a little bit and left for like 3 or 4 years, kind of before the 5-year program, the midway, and then like into that a little bit, basically as like a provisional student, like as long as you keep training. Like I had a pretty solid background prior to it.
Yeah.
So I was able to pick it up pretty quick. Like I already had a decent foundation and I was already training with them. So I had a lot of the material. So it wasn't like I was going out there fresh. I had a pretty good head start. And I, at this point, was living in Chicago. So I went from Philly to Vermont and then out to Chicago. I actually did a brief stay here in Boston and then out. And once I was there, I started relying a little bit. You know, I had a car and payments and rent and, you know, a girlfriend. So like I lived with them and, you know, I couldn't leave her to just pay the rent while I like, all right, honey, I'm going to go out to Kung Fu Mountain for 2 months. You know, I'm going to drop all of these payments and, you know, good luck. I'll see you in 2 months. So that made it a little bit more difficult. And like, honestly, that's why a lot of people couldn't stay out there.
That's what I mean. There's just so much going on nowadays.
You don't realize how like connected into the matrix you really are until you have an opportunity to like disconnect and you go
for real and not just for like 2 days or whatever.
Yeah, like everybody can go on a little retreat.
Yeah,
you know, you can go out into the woods and leave your cell phone at home, and it's great, and that's good. I think people should do that because you recharge. It's different when you commit to making that your life, and like good on the couple of folks that were able to do it. You know, those are some of my like martial brothers and sisters that I also made really deep bonds with because we trained and suffered. And you know, I only did a small portion of what they did in terms of their full-time commitment, but I took all of that and. I have, you know, I trained that stuff and I kept working, kept applying everything that I was learning. I was working at a school in Chicago that primarily did Filipino arts, but I was like heading the Chinese martial arts side and they did Muay Thai and BJJ as well. It was like a pretty big school, 2 floors. And I trained on one side, on the top floor, and everything else was kind of on the second or the floor below it. And just same thing, going out, training as much as I could and coming back, going out, training as much as I could and coming back. And the school that I was at in Chicago ended up closing. The school was doing well. It was just like an internal thing. They couldn't keep it going. And at that point I was like, well, I've been out here in Chicago. I basically went out there just to do it. Just like, I want to live somewhere else. I've never lived anywhere other than the East Coast.
So it wasn't like a specific training place or something that you wanted to do?
Because I was going out to California. I was doing that at the retreat center. And you know, I was training Sanda with a group in Chicago, but it wasn't my school. And I wasn't like super attached to anything there. Like the training was good just to keep everything up. But and at that point I started competing a lot. I was doing like traditional stuff. I was getting some fights and traveling a little bit for that. So I did stuff in Chicago and St. Louis, out in California and San Jose and Texas, Florida. And I was getting like a little bit of momentum just kind of in the like fighting and competition circuit that I was playing. And at the point that school closed, I was like, well, I'm going to move back to the East Coast. And I was like, put out something, I think on Facebook, like, hey, if anybody has like a job or a room, let me know. I'm looking to move back. And like right away, the guy that was running YMAA Boston, which was originally the headquarters school for that organization, and then headquarters moved out to California when the founder, Dr. Yang, moved there. Yeah. And the school went to his son, and then his son actually joined him out there, and the school went to Ben Warner, who is the current school owner. And he emailed me and was like, hey, I saw that you're like looking to move back to the East Coast. I've been following all the stuff you've been doing at the retreat center, because I was like posting some videos and stuff like on YouTube of like the training out there and like some competitions. And he was following just kind of like my career through all that. He's like, the stuff you're doing looks really great. Would you be interested in coming back out to Boston and being an instructor here? And I was like, sure, if you can find me a place to stay, I'll come out. And he's like, done. Give me like 2 days. And found like a room in someone's attic of their house that they had like redone. That was one of the like kids instructors and students at YMAA. And I knew her from when I started coming down years ago, when I was living in Vermont and coming down and stuff. And they were like, yeah, I mean, we got it's like part-time teaching, but we got some work for you and we got a place for you to stay. And I was like, fuck it, I'll go. Let's do it. So I went and I started teaching at YMAA Boston, just sort of part-time as an instructor there, and still going out to the retreat center when I could. So I would work for a little bit, shoot out there, train for a little bit, come back and kind of like pass on like the secrets, so to speak, like whatever they were training out there. I was coming back like, okay, this is what these guys are doing. They're doing it at a really high level. We got to do it like that. Or like their wrestling is just insane. They're like, take you down like instantly. Like we got to be doing that. And so I would come out and like try to recreate what I was doing out there here in Boston. And so I did that for a couple more years, and just like kind of back and forth until my girlfriend moved back out here, and we got, bills again, and until it became too difficult, like to get out there, and, had too much of a commitment back, kind of connected into the matrix. And, that was that. I haven't been out there in 4 years or so.
So it's still going on though.
Yeah, they're old. I mean, the 10-year program ended, and
did anyone graduate the 10-year program?
Yeah, one.
One out of how many started?
Oh, gee, I don't even remember how 15 or something started. Yeah. And then so the full 10 years, only one guy actually did the full 10 years, but they did like try to do like a second recruitment in like year 9 or whatever to fill the program back up. And I think there was 2 that like jumped in the next year and did like 9 years essentially. And then halfway through they did the 5-year program, and there was 1, 2, 3, I think 4 people that graduated from the 5-year program. So 1 did 10 years, 2 did 9 years, and then 4 did 5 years. And then they added, because there was like a push when the program ended. They're like, okay, well, we're going to sell the facility. And everyone was like, no, you got to keep going. And so I think they added a 3-year program, and they're just finishing that up this year. So I think after this, I mean, the property's for sale, and Master Yang is going to quote unquote retire. I think he's still going to always be teaching and doing stuff, because, he's an international, instructor. People want him all over there. There's YMAs in like 13 countries. We've got schools in Poland and Ireland and New Zealand, South Africa. So we've got schools all over. So he'll be busy the whole time. But the facility's for sale though. That they're going to not do that program. Big part of that is just the money's not there. It's hard to keep that going.
Sure.
Unless you're paying like crazy tuition. But like we said, like it's hard to be able to, unless you're just like independently wealthy, you're training full time. How are you going to afford to be out there? It's tough to keep that facility going. So
sorry. Freya keeps going back and forth between us and harassing us both as we're going through this. So if you hear little pitter-patters and her dropping the ball or whatever, that's whatever. You get some ambient noise here in the background, whether it's bottle caps or fucking whatever, or dogs.
You get the sensation you really hear.
The gestalt, raw. So is that dude that did the whole 10 years, is he just like one of the gnarlier dudes now? Oh,
yeah. Yeah. Again, that's like my... Kung fu brother, right?
Yeah.
But so I'll never say it to his face, because I just give him shit all the time. And he gives me shit all the time. But I mean, he's very, very skilled, and he really, really knows his stuff. And the dude is like solid. I mean, he's strong as a fucking ox and faster than I could ever handle. One of the fastest dudes I've ever trained with. I mean, it's hard to gauge like the success of a program like that because it's kind of uncharted territory, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like nobody's really doing that kind of intensive training anymore.
Yeah, not since like the 1600s. Like.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like it's a little bit tough to like figure out like, all right, what was the end goal? But in terms of really having a good foundation in the traditional arts, like it seems like, they've produced a good level where, kind of like we said earlier, like the idea is, all right, you really know this material and, everyone's still pretty young, so you can still get better. And then you'll be able to pass that on to your students at an even higher level than we got from our teacher. And then hopefully, out of maybe the hundreds of students that you get, one or two of them might really, really commit to it and be able to get it to be even better. The idea is like, we gotta bring those arts back up because we haven't seen like real good traditional high skill, high level in hundreds of years. Practically it's always legend. Oh, these guys could do all these amazing things, but there's no footage of that. So we have to like test it. We have to see if that's really possible through this kind of intensive training.
Yeah. What was the hardest thing you had to do when you were there in Cali, on the mountain?
Hardest thing,
or one of the, what sticks out as like particularly grueling or tough in, whether it's mentally or physically?
Oh, I mean, by far the mental game was the hardest thing for that kind of training. Like I said, because you don't see people. I mean, you're literally up on a mountain away from everyone. There's not traffic. There's not like neighbors walking by. And it's mind numbing because to get that kind of skill, you're doing the exact same thing. So they say like whatever, like your 10,000 repetitions or whatever to truly learn something. You're doing 100,000 out there.
Yeah.
And anything. It's like, okay, here's a movement with a sword. You go back and forth. Okay. You go back and forth. All right. I'm starting to get it. Great. Do that for an hour. Right. If it's and that's the difference is like in a regular class, like if you go to like a karate class or an Aikido
you can
class,
have everyone do one thing for an hour.
No, right? You have an hour-long class. And so you got to like warm up. You got to give them like some conditioning. You show them a technique. Maybe you do it for 15 minutes, but that's, 3/4 of your class right there. And then you do another little something different to keep it interesting because if they're paying clients, they need to come back and you're doing an hour-long class maybe 3 times a week if you've got good students. They knock that out before breakfast there.
Yeah.
It's like you're training for 3 hours before you eat. And then you eat breakfast, you get a little break, and then you do another 4 hours, and you get lunch, you do another 4 hours, and you eat dinner, and then you're so tired of doing the exact same thing. And the next day, you're not learning new stuff every day. You're just doing the same stuff for a really long time. And you start, okay, I'm moving this sword back and forth. And then like 40 minutes into it, you are so fucking bored. Like your brain is mush, but your body starts picking it up different, and your muscles are so tired from holding this thing. Your hands are so calloused, and you're getting this deeper level of like being able to do that movement, but you're thinking about, something totally different because it's hard to stay focused on one thing. And like, that's the hardest thing is like you get bored and you get numb to doing that same thing over and over again. And it sounds kind of weird. It doesn't sound pleasant, but like the end result is nice. Like when you get something deeper and you like finally like, oh, there's way more to just this, like move the stick back and forth, move that sword back and forth or forward and back. And you start to appreciate it a little bit different every day because you're doing it for a really long time. But it is really hard mentally to just like push yourself to like, I'm tired, I'm bored, I'm going to do the same thing. Like you have to really want to do it. It's like being in a shitty job and like, cutting plastic out every single day for like little molds or something. So like that was hard. The other side of that is like, you're stuck with the same people and you have to work with them, whether you like them or you hate them or they're annoying or you get like, you're stressed. So it's like, I don't like the way they washed that dish or like, like they ate the last of the soy milk or something in their cereal. Like, and it's like roommate stuff, but like you don't get to go to work and not see them for 8 hours. You see the same people every day.
24 hours a day. Yeah.
I love everybody that's from there, but like, everybody's bumps into each other a little bit in terms of their personalities here and there.
Yeah,
And, it's
and you guys are there fighting. It's not like a Zen Buddhist retreat either. You know?
Exactly. Right. And so like, it's hard. And that's part of like the ego that you have to kind of get rid of, or they say like, you can't have a mask when you're in a training setting like that. Like you have to just be like kind of raw about it. And like, it's hard to do that. Cause like, oh, motherfucker, you punched me in the face. Like that's what we were supposed to do. But it's hard to like, just take that and be like, no, it's okay. You know? And like, and you want to get back at that. And like, maybe that day you can't, like you're just the one getting beat up every time you're doing applications or whatever it is. And like, that kind of wears on you a little bit. It sharpens you, but it also like wears you down at first. So like, and again, it's like, you don't get to take a step back from that person. You got to train and do the same thing. Like, you know, you take like, they took me down a little too hard that time. I was sore and it hurt my elbow or whatever. And it's like, but I got to deal with them the next hour and the next hour and then the next day. And that's tough. Like, that's just tough you don't get to disconnect.
Yeah.
It's not like here where you go to the gym and like, you know, you whatever, maybe you don't like the person you worked with, but whatever, you're going to go home and forget about that person. And you might see him again, but not until you go back to the gym, right? Yeah. So it's just
you can tolerate anyone for an hour or whatever.
Yeah. It's
almost anyone for an hour.
It depends on the person, I suppose.
Yeah.
So like the mental stress is definitely the hardest thing of that. But I also remember physically, one was running the mountain, which is just like pure leg strength and cardio, which we would walk down to like a creek and then fill a backpack of rocks. And I think we were supposed to have like 50 pounds of rocks, and like we got weighed when we came back up. And then they started wearing weight vests. So that was just like, you knew the weight, and then you had to run back up the mountain. When I say up the mountain, we're talking like a grade that's like, there was parts where you could reach straight out and touch, like you were clawing hand and foot.
Clawing the mountain,
It's not like a slight up incline.
It's not a 15% grade. It's like,
It's heavy. So, I mean, some parts flatten out, and then it's like, there are some parts where you're like, you say you're running, but you're like hiking up this mountain on
climbing,
things, right? Climbing this mountain. And that was like always just grueling, because like you're dirty, and like I said, like sometimes there's parts where you're like hand and foot, and you got to have all this weight on you, and you run up, and like, you know, cardio is never fun, endurance is never fun. And then we would do this cinder block training where you'd have literally a cinder block that you'd have to like pick up and flip and catch. And like, I still do it. I still make my students do it today, because it's really like your grip strength and upper body from like flipping this heavy stone just gets you really, really strong. And like, you have to have that kind of grip strength when you're doing like these wrestling.
And plus you're not gripping a rubber grip. Like you're gripping, it probably builds up some callus on your hands. Or, you know,
cut your hands up to fucking shit. It's crazy. Yeah. So like, there's all these angles, you got to flip it. But then you start.
I think I heard Lenny kind of.
Yes, Lenny.
Not gripe, but you know what I mean.
Lenny Lashley does that training. He's a student of mine and a really good friend. And so, you know, that too, like he can tell you, like, it's a little bit that mental game of like, that fucking stone. Like, I gotta pick that thing up and flip it, and if I drop it, it smashes my toes, and like if I jam up my finger, it's like, it's tough. And once you could get it all, like there's like a single hand variation, it definitely gets you strong. But then you have to start like throwing them at each other and like getting your hand-eye coordination. And like, when you're there, it doesn't seem weird, but then when you try to explain certain things, like, we like got cinder blocks and threw them at each other. Yeah. It sounds fake, but it's like, no, you're trying to work like this hand-eye coordination. You got this momentum that's coming at you, and you have to like catch it and slow it down and like flip it and turn it back.
Sure.
And, you know, it's good. It's practical training, but it sounds crazy. Like the body hardening stuff, all the traditional, like to be able to take a punch, like you had a mallet and you'd like hit yourself with it or whatever, a stick and bottle, and you'd hit yourself with it. So it's like, you're trying to display, what's like a typical afternoon? It's like, well, you throw cinder blocks at each other, and then you beat yourself in the stomach with a hammer, and it's like that's.
And this is all the traditional program.
Yeah, this is exactly like that's. You don't see that stuff in normal gyms. Now you do like kettlebells, and you know, you get a squat bar, and like you do more traditional strength training. So, or like modern strength training. The traditional stuff for traditional arts is like all this weird, crazy stuff that you, again, like you'd see in movies, and some people still do that, like. Traditional schools still do that, but you don't see it a lot in like combat sport now. So I'm trying to bring a little bit of that into that world, because I think there's value in like doing some of the traditional stuff.
Yeah, man. Especially, like you said, like the body strengthening or the tightening, so that you can, hardening stuff, so you can take hits better and whatnot. What, kind of going back into the combat sports, like, you delved into kind of your history with like the traditional stuff. Like, how did you develop more of your career in like the combat sports? And I know you've been competitive and not just training, but you've actually been competing, and you have a career with that. Like, how did you develop that, and where have you kind of gone with that?
So, like for traditional martial arts, like competitions, there's like forms where you're just like doing set movements and stuff like that. And you can get judged on like how well you do it, how grounded and balanced you are, how much power you're producing. And for Chinese martial arts, they usually like split competitions up into two categories, like forms and then fighting. So whether it's striking, like Sanda, and there's like a couple different variations that you can do that. Like there's like light contact when you're not allowed to knock someone out. It's like good for amateurs to get into. And then there's like full contact, just regular like kickboxing. And there's wrestling, there's Shuai Jiao, and there's Tye wrestling and stuff like that. There's a bunch of different variations of it. So usually people do like one or the other. And because I had a background in a little bit of both, I did both. So a lot of Chinese martial arts competitions will have like the forms and stuff, and like all the kids go in the morning, and then in the evening they like put up a ring and they have like fights at night. And so I started doing every Chinese martial arts competition that had Sanda bouts that I could possibly find. It's also why I ended up traveling a lot for it, because it's not as popular now. So you have to look for it. So I was going out to St. Louis and to New Orleans and to Florida and stuff to find like competitions that were doing Sanda, because it wasn't as popular. But that was just it. Like I knew about these competitions from when people were doing forms and stuff like that. Like the traditional schools would compete and be like, oh, well, they have a Sanda category, I want to get into that. And I liked that more. Like I got a couple of like grand champion titles in 2014, and then I think again in 2018, from doing both, where like you can do forms and skills competitions, fighting and wrestling, and if you win all of it, you get a title in that. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do both, like go big or go home. So I started getting into that. There's like a couple of organizations that still put on Sanda bouts. Kung Fu Sanda Federation and ICMAC are like two of the bigger ones that have stuff like a couple different places in the country. And so, like I said, I travel for it just because there's not a lot of local competitions. There's not like a local Sanda league anymore. There used to be a couple, but it's hard to find. But if you search, you can find it. You go, okay, well, the next competition's in Chicago, so I'm shipping out to Chicago, or the next competition's in Orlando, so I'm gonna ship out to Orlando, and you're doing it that way. And yeah, I mean, my biggest thing was always trying to mix like the traditional training back into modern combat sport, because I think there's a lot of value in both, and I want to see Chinese martial arts have a little something like a little bit of rawness in like combat sport again, because I mean, I did quite well in all my fights and all my competitions, but I want to do more. I want to be at a much higher level. And, I think like for the US, everyone's like, oh, well, UFC or Bellator or something like that's where you got to go for MMA. And that's because like that pool is so much bigger. Like there's way more people that want to be on TV with that stuff. There's a lot less people that are like, I want to be the best Sanda fighter in a little fight in a gymnasium, or like in a small hotel lobby or something like that, or like ballroom or whatever.
In a lobby, that's something that happens if you use the word retard. You end up getting in a fight in the hotel lobby at 5 a.m. in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hey, that's right. Hey, like I said, so there's not a lot of competition. Sometimes you got to make it for yourself.
Yeah,
right?
you
gotta find ways to test your skills.
I'll tell Packer he was part of a Sanda competition.
Yeah. He comes and he trains a little bit with us too. But yeah, so I did very well in those competitions, but again, like that pool is not very big to draw from. There's just not that many people training really hard or like that are high level athletes that are going into these Chinese martial arts competitions, because it's like a little bit split. Like I said, they're not like making a lot of money because they're doing like all this traditional stuff and a lot of kids martial arts and stuff in the morning, and then they like change everything over and do like fights or bouts in the evening, and it's a lot of it's like pay to play. So like you pay your registration fee and you go and you weigh in, you do all your stuff, you fight, and then you're not walking away with any prize money unless it's like a much bigger thing. So it's like you're paying for everything unless you have sponsors or something. Like you're not making money. So that's why you don't see any like pro Sanda fighters in the U.S. anymore. Yeah. If you really want to do it, you got to go outside of the U.S. Like that's
where are the hot spots for? I mean, outside of China, like where like the hot spots for it now?
China, Iran, Egypt, and Russia. Like those are always like the big.
So basically, you have to be an enemy of the United States to want to do something.
Yeah, well, going outside.
What the fuck you getting into, man? Just kidding.
Not hard to get there.
I know, anyway. You know what I mean.
But no, like those teams, like
it's like North Korea. I'm just fucking with it.
Nobody sees the North Korea Sanda team. We don't know what they're doing.
I'm just fucking with it.
But no, like if you go to China to like the world Sanda, competition, like those are like the countries and the teams that are always doing the best and like are kind of like the biggest names in that sport. And they're huge. Like those countries, they are huge in those countries. And like, that's also why like you see guys getting into the UFC that are coming from some of those teams in Russia and in the Philippines too. Like one championship, which is like the biggest fight league in the world, but just not in the U.S. Like they've got a ton of like wushu Sanda. Wushu just means martial arts, but you hear it called wushu Sanda all the time. Like Team Lakay, like they've got a bunch of guys. They've got guys that hold title belts that all have this Sanda background. Because again, if you train it right, it's got a really good integration into MMA. So we just don't have it here in the U.S. So that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to get out of the U.S. and like have a higher level of competition. But right now it's all about
for you personally to go compete.
Yeah. But also just like as a gym, as a school, like I want to be able to dominate our sport, but I want to produce students that can do it too. And I want to do it beyond just like being the biggest Sanda school in the US. Cause that's honestly not, that's not that difficult. Not to say like the people that are fighting in those competitions are, I don't want to say that they're not good athletes, but there are better athletes out there in combat sports. So you gotta search it out. And then I think that would give us a much better representation here in the US for that kind of thing.
Yeah. And are you seeing it? Like, I know we've kind of touched on this, but, with some of the, I know you mentioned the Russian guy and stuff before. Are you starting to see it start to finally creep back more into like American, like MMA stuff? A
little bit. Yeah. Like I said, like more recently, there have been fighters that have a Sanda background or train in Sanda that are coming out, and you're seeing them a little bit more in like the UFC cards and some Bellator and stuff like that. So I feel like it's a little bit on the up. And part of that is just like in general, I feel like in the industry, right, everybody kind of did one art, whether it was karate or judo or jiu-jitsu or something like that. And like when the UFC started, it was like one style against another style. You'd see like a sumo guy going up against a boxer.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not going to lie. I kind of miss those days because that was like the fun part of it. Bro. Like, I don't know how it all turned into like boxing and jiu-jitsu. Like, but like it used to be way funner to me at the very beginning when it was still like street brawler was like still like one of the classifications and that.
No, 100%. For me, that's way more. That was way more interesting.
Hold on. Speaking of that, hey, plots. You guys calm down. We got Freya and Grim practicing.
They're getting amped.
K9 MMA over there.
They're the next Sanda champs in the US. Yeah, man. I think that was like kind of, for me personally, that was like the golden age of like MMA. Is way more interesting to see these like two styles. Like you get dudes in like the
when there wasn't even like weight classes, like
it was
be a
crazy.
300-pound street brawler and like a 150-pound, Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy. And
yeah, you get a dude in a frog button like kung fu jacket facing like a dude wearing one boxing glove.
Yeah.
Shout out if you know who that is. Like it was cool. But then like, I mean, within that, you did see like some of the arts kind of started to separate. Like jiu-jitsu did really well.
Yeah, of course.
You know, like kickboxing and boxing did really well because they pressure test a lot of their stuff right away. It's way more applicable right in the beginning, in my opinion. And then for a while, you got like MMA as a style. So it was like every karate gym all of a sudden was an MMA gym, right?
Yeah.
And like you were getting gyms opening up that were like that was the style, was MMA. It wasn't any one thing in particular.
Yeah.
And
it was just kind of whatever the guy that owned the gym kind of picked up that day.
Yeah, and because it was marketable, right?
Yeah,
like that's people were getting really into the UFC and the Ultimate Fighter, and like they wanted that. So like every dude with a fucking tap out shirt was like, "Oh, I'm an MMA fighter. I want an MMA gym." Like they didn't know anything about what was good, bad, or anything. And so it kind of like flooded everything with this like generic MMA. And then I think people started to see like, well, that's all fine and good, but if you want to get really good at like submission wrestling, grappling, or, you know, jiu-jitsu, like you got to go to someone that has a little bit of a specialty in that.
Sure.
And if you want really good striking, like you got to go to an art and a teacher or a coach that really specializes in that. And like, if you want to be an MMA fighter, so you start doing jiu-jitsu for your ground game and like Muay Thai or something.
And then it's on you to bring it together in a way that it makes it in a way that's formidable against your enemy or your opponent.
And like you might have a coach that helps you like integrate that. Like, okay, you got to add like ground and pound and stuff like that, like some of the elements in between those two things. But so you, like I said, I think people saw a big sort of sprawl of MMA generic MMA gyms. And then as that kind of died out, it became a little more polarizing. And so some of these gyms with like a specific art started getting more and more popular. And now like Brazilian jiu-jitsu is one of the most popular in, you know, the entire country. Like everybody's looking for that. And Muay Thai is getting way more popular. Boxing is getting popular again. Like you're starting to see sort of a swell in that. And it's a much smaller swell, but with some of these Sanda fighters coming into like that mainstream and people with a Sanda background, it is getting a little bit more attention and a little bit more light.
Sure. And if any of these guys start doing good, and then, you know, once the word just starts getting thrown around a little bit more, then people get interested and start investigating it more, and, you know, and then following up with that type of shit.
Yeah. Like I said, like Zhang Weili is a UFC champion right now. And like that put a lot of light. She was the first Chinese national champion to get a belt in the UFC. And I mean, she had a crazy career. She had some of like the most gnarly fights. I think she was up for like, not just like female fight of the year, but just fight of the year in general. I mean, she had some really, really gnarly fights and is doing really, really well. And so she has like that traditional background in both Sanda and in Shuai Jiao, the wrestling, and does like traditional Kung Fu and Tai Chi as well. And so
did she go to the mountain?
She didn't go to that, no, but she does go to a mountain and is trained. Like you follow her on like Instagram and stuff. You see she goes and trains with all these old traditional masters as well. Like, I mean, she's always in the gym. She trains all the time. Super inspiring. But that's what I'm saying. Like you have to be that kind of committed and like that level of athlete and have that kind of representation for Chinese martial arts in general. So, but you got to find gyms that are offering that, or like places where you can really train. So it's getting a little more popular. I'm hoping to sort of lead that myself. And I've got some goals to get that word out there that, you know, it is an applicable style that has a lot to offer. If people are, you know, looking for it.
Devil's advocate question here. I know you're looking to like continue pursuing your own like career in competition. And now you have a gym. Do you have like, how do you kind of balance those or like make time? Which I know might be an early question because the gym just physically opened, you know, a month ago, but is that something you foresee, like, or is there ways around that to like kind of balance everything out to be able to concentrate on your training, and training for competition for yourself, and then also be able to keep training your students, and then even just the fucking logistics of running a business, which is like the horrible part of it, you know what I mean? Which we all got to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see, man. Like, I'm not ready to like hang up the gloves yet. I want to keep competing and I want to keep fighting. So I'm training a ton now. I mean, like the pandemic hit and we all went into quarantine, and, some people just kind of stopped training and like, I'll get back to it when everything's cleared. I like ramped my training up. I'm training more now than I have probably in the last 2 years. Like I said, I'm working with, I have my Sanda coach is Kong Lee, who is, like I said, probably the biggest name in Sanda in the US at the very least.
And are you doing it remotely? Or
So I'm working with him like twice a week through Skype. I just like totally lucked out on that one too. Like I won like a 10-minute phone call with him or something. Like you can get to talk to him about acting, because he's an actor and he's like in a bunch of Hollywood movies and shows and stuff. And he's like, or MMA or fitness or nutrition or whatever. And I was like, I want to talk to him about Sanda and his, kind of application of that into MMA. And I got this phone call, and this was like right in the beginning of the pandemic. And I, was chatting with him, and he's like, oh, so you do Sanda? Oh, you're opening a gym. You're trying to pass on the arts. Like, that's really cool. And just like through talking to him, he's like, I'm not really teaching anybody anymore, but I'd be happy to start working with you a little bit and kind of see where you're at. And so we started doing stuff through Skype, and he, kind of looked at all my material and went, yeah, it's really in line with the stuff that I do. And like, let's talk a little bit about evolving it and making it a little better and applying it to MMA, and kind of making a game plan and going through a bunch of things with him, like setting up my training. And so I do a couple sessions with him a week just through Skype. He watches me, tells me what I'm doing good, bad, and ugly, and gives me corrections and gives me goals, what I got to do. And I've got my a sparring partner that I have designated to work with. And so we do rounds every week, and I send it to him, and he critiques me and tells me what I got to do more of and less of. And so I'm training like crazy, trying to get that, kind of back in for Sanda. And I'm working with a wrestling coach straight from Inner Mongolia, trying to get my Shuai Jiao and wrestling up to par and to sort of evolve that. So I'm trying to come out of this, I'm trying to come out of 2020 strong and kind of jump back into fights and some competition for both wrestling and for striking. And, it's to be seen what I'm going to have for time. Because certainly, like, if you really want to get to a high level, like we've talked about it before, you and I, like you've got to be a little bit selfish, right? Yeah. Like you've got to really just only care about your training and getting better and being the best and like having that drive. So it'll be tough, like, being a coach and worrying about other people's progress and running a business. Yeah. It's not like I'm just teaching out of somebody else's gym. I'm teaching out of my own. So I got to run the business as well as coach all the people that are coming in and teach all the classes. But I'm trying to find a balance there. It's a little bit funny right now. Classes are so small. I only have a handful of people coming in anyways. We'll see coming out of this, what kind of shape I'm in and, how far I can go with it before, I kind of hit a wall. But
yeah,
I'm always going to push, always going to try to get better for myself, whether it's in competition or just my own training or just my own, shape. So we'll see.
Yeah, man. So how are you're training with someone with wrestling? Are they in town from Mongolia? Like, is that Skype as well?
So that's through like Zoom and WeChat.
How does that? I can see how it could work for like striking and technique with that. But how do you do that with wrestling?
Same kind of thing. So like we link up, and they're also like doing a monthly session with my students, not just myself, but give me drills to work on and give me concepts and stuff like that. And then I have a training partner that we wrestle, we'll do rounds and stuff like that. And I send the footage over to them. They go, okay, you fucking suck doing this. You got to stop doing that, but this is working for you. So now you got to do this a little differently, and kind of giving me what I need to change and how to get better. Like, again, because I already have a base for all of this stuff. It's just fine tuning it and fine tuning my training.
Yeah.
For all the things that I'm doing. It's not like I'm learning a ton of new material.
No,
it's
just
making that material better. So yeah,
It's just crazy because, like, you know, I've talked to people in bands, and, like, you know, like the band members live all over the country now, and they're still making music, you know, you know, whether it's like, you know, one guy sends a riff to the other guitarist and then he adds his stuff, and then the bass player adds some, or the drummer adds some, or, you know, they just throw riffs around and then get together and practice. But I had never heard of it with like fight training. Is that a pretty common practice now, or like people are working with people remotely like that?
I mean, it is now.
Yeah,
It definitely wasn't before.
Prior to March of this year, you know, in the pandemic and whatnot. But is that something that had been gaining more? It's just interesting to hear about, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a limitation to it, but there's a lot. I mean, I'm running online classes myself, like 3 times a week, because I've got students that, you know, were in college coming here to Boston. They all got booted out, so they're not here anymore, and I've been doing online classes to keep them going. And so it is more common now. Like, that's kind of what we all had to do as like coaches or whatever, just to stay active and relevant. Not everybody did, but a lot of people had to start doing that. And it's tough. Like, it's very limiting. It's one thing if you have a lot of experience, or you already have a lot of material, and you're like fine tuning details, and you're like building strategies and just trying to like get back into shape or whatever, and figure out like the mental game and stuff like that. Cause that's all stuff you can just talk about. And that's stuff, like I said, like if you have somebody to work with and you can test these things with, and like send it footage or something, you can get like some critiques. And that's what I've been able to do. But it's another thing to like learn remotely something new.
Yeah.
That's super difficult. And I don't think you can make just practically, if you really want to do something, you're not going to be able to just do it online. Even if you have like a live person watching you do stuff, you can get some, but until you have a way of pressure testing this with someone, and not just one person really, but, you know, tons of people, where you can get different body types and reaction times, and, you know, sizes and weights and speeds and stuff like that. Like, it takes a lot to get good, honestly. Right. And, so it's definitely a new thing. I don't think anyone's making like crazy progress unless they, like, I think I'm a somewhat of a more rare situation where like I already had a foundation in these things, and I was able to link up with coaches in those same fields, and, you know, get training and sort of corrections from them on like what I should be doing with my training and how I should be developing. But it's another thing if you're like, oh, I want to learn Sanda, or I want to learn Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu, like something that especially that like needs another person to really learn. Like, there's so much emphasis on that. I think you'd be limited. You can learn some of the basics. Like, I go over shadow boxing, basic stance, you know, guard, and how to throw the good mechanics for a punch and a kick and stuff like that. And, you know, you can get a good workout in for sure. And you can learn some of the technical stuff, but at a certain point you're going to hit a wall where you're not really going any further. I don't know how I don't know if that the longevity of these online programs and classes are going to be there for the masses, if that makes sense.
It was something good for just kind of keeping up with stuff when there was no other way. But like you said, for you, it's different because you've already had all the fundamentals and stuff. It's just kind of fine tuning things and having people evaluate your technique. And when they give you feedback, you'll understand it more than someone who's just learning some basics right off the rip. Right. Like, it's going to be hard to really to do that.
Yeah. And so little things too, like I think you'll start seeing more like online workshops and seminars. Yeah. Because that's a little different. Like, you go to a workshop or a seminar to get information. Like, if it's a 3-hour seminar, you're not going to learn and develop the skill in 3 hours. You're going to figure out the method. You're going to get the corrections on, okay, you should be training it like this or doing it like this. And then you would have to go and do that with your partner at your gym or whatever, again, over and over again until you start getting it. So I think that will probably stick around. Like, a lot of the, big names will be like, oh, well, you're only going to get this information if you go to where they are. And like, that's how it's been for years. Yeah. But now it's like, oh, I could do this online thing and cast sort of a bigger net and get the information out to way more people all over the place. But then it's on them to
really hone it and develop it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we'll see some of that, but I don't know. It's interesting to see just the future of gyms in general coming out of this. how are people training now, and what are we going to do, and when are people going to feel comfortable, and
I mean,
mine is going to be big, or if it's just all going to go back to normal, or what.
Even my regular gym, like this morning, I was leaving, and it was like there was me and one other guy there. You know what I mean? And it was like I was walking out. I was like, "She's all yours, bud." And he was laughing. He's like, because it's just bizarre. Like, but then there'll be some days where there's like a couple people there, but it's even though it's physically open again, there's still people have there's still a hesitation on some people's part to go into any kind of public place like that, especially where you're going to be sweaty and using equipment and whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we see it too. I mean, obviously we just opened, and like the number one thing I get when people call or I inquire is like, when are regular classes going to happen? Like, when is regular contact classes going to happen? When's COVID going to be over? Fuck, I
like, dude, I own a gym. I can't tell you when COVID's going to be over. Like, probably never. Like, the flu's still around. This is probably going to be around. Regardless if they want to.
Question to get asked.
Yeah, but. It's like, and everyone's like, oh, this is why. And I get so aggravated when governors and stuff are like, Baker's like, well, it's going to be like this, like. We're not going to go to stage 4 until there's a vaccine. Hey, dude, There's no vaccine for the regular flu yet that is fully effective. There's no vaccine for the common cold, dude. You know what I mean? So it's like, don't put your eggs in that fucking basket. Like, and I'm not going to go take any fucking vaccine that was made in 3 months. You know what I mean? Like,
nobody wants a rush job.
A rush job.
You don't want vaccine. Surgery for like in the back room somewhere in Mexico. You don't want a vaccine that was.
Hey. There's very fine dentistry in Mexico City, as me and Dan can attest to. But you know what I mean. It's just like crazy. Like it takes like years to develop a good vaccine and to really test it and run it through like clinical trials and all that shit. Like, there's not going to be no vaccine till next year, man. So you can't shut this whole fucking shit down till next year.
Yeah, no.
Especially when you got Walmart motherfuckers still opening and fucking walking around. I'm gonna say it to the day I die, dude. Like, and I know I'm beating a dead horse.
Classes at Walmart because they're allowed to have fucking that many people there.
Yeah, sure, right.
It's okay to congregate for certain things.
Yeah, no, COVID won't attack you if you're at Walmart, but but it'll attack you anywhere else, exactly. or any box chain store. But dude, I mean, your facility is so like, especially for being in the city. I know you're technically not in Boston proper, but
right outside.
You're in Boston. You're in fucking Boston, right? So. There is no, I haven't, I'm not blowing smoke, but I have not seen a more impressive facility like in a city limit, you know what I mean? Like, or in a city in so long, it just sucks that like, the build out was during fucking COVID, like, you know what I mean? And like, so the launch is like coming out of that. Are you getting, do you have plans? Like, do you have like people like wanting to come in just for training? Like, not even necessarily like classes and stuff, like, you got so many heavy bags, you got like, all kinds of shit going on. Like, I could see it being a place where all people from all kinds of backgrounds, whether it's just like a casual person off the street or like, someone who trains in a different kind of fighting system or something, would want to go there and train. And
I mean, we made sure, right, that's all by design. Like, I don't do anything a little bit. Like I said, like, when I want to learn traditional arts, I'm going to go to a mountain and learn from my teacher's teacher to make sure I'm getting like the real thing, right? So like I've been putting together this gym for like 3 or 4 years. I mean, we looked for a facility for a solid 3.5 years before we found a location that had enough of the boxes checked off for like the ideal facility. Tall ceilings, no posts in the middle. We have a garage door. We have enough bathrooms and areas to change, and a front desk and area and everything. And we have the best of the best brand new mats and a big 20-foot ring, and the nicest Yokow bags and pads and gear. And that's all by design because, again, like, I'm trying to represent something that doesn't have a lot of good representation, and I want it to show really well, and I want it to be, whether you're looking for that or not, people to go, oh shit, this is a nice facility. I want to train here. What is it that you do here? Like, I want that to be like kind of secondary. Like, wow, this place is great. And we have like a really decent like social media following, just again, like, because it's kind of rare and there isn't a ton of representation. Like, we tried to start that really early on, back when like when I first started the program here in Boston, it was out of a community center. Like I was a athletic director at a community center in West Roxbury, and we had like the shittiest little back room that we were able. It was a locker room, and we were able to like put down some mats and like clean it up and like get some heavy bags that were all like mismatched and donated or whatever. And like that's where that program started in 2016 or 2015 rather.
Yeah.
So like 5 years ago, that's where that program started. And then it kind of evolved. I became the full-time adult program director at YMAA Boston. And so when I became full-time there, I was able to move the program. So now we are like out of a shared space for a traditional school. So we like upgraded a little bit, right? And we still kept that program going. And I had some students competing. So like we were getting a little bit of traction online and just like people being like, oh, wow, there's like a Sanda school in Boston again. Like this is really interesting. And so I really, like I started writing down everything. Okay, what does my ideal facility look like? I'd want this kind of gear and these kinds of bags. And I want these mats and this kind of a ring. Like that's all the stuff that I saw. And I like stuck to it. I made sure that like, I didn't just jump on something just cause I could. I took my time making sure that we had a really good facility, that we had the best gear, that we were getting everything sort of set up. And when we started posting pictures and we started like putting it out, like, hey, we have a full-time real deal gym for Sanda and Shuai Jiao, and you know, whatever other arts people want to come in and share. We got a lot of messages and stuff like that. Like, oh my God, this is an amazing facility. I can't believe it. Like, I want to come out and train there. Like, I don't even live there. I need to come out and train. Which was great. It was like really encouraging because again, like I feel like we built something that shows really well and has all the stuff and all the like amenities and features that people want out of a gym, like a real serious gym. Just like a shitty time, like all those people can't come out and see it. Yeah. Because it's like, well, I'm not getting on a plane to go to Boston to be able to see this gym and there's nothing happening and everybody's being weird, but like. So like we have a handful of folks that have come. We've had a handful of fighters that come. They're like, oh man, I can't wait to train here. I can't wait to do camps here. And just kind of like build out everything to be, like a destination gym, if that makes sense. Right.
Sure,
like, and if you want to check out Sanda, like we are the spot, especially in the US when there's not a lot, we are like the spot for it. And that was the idea. That was the goal. And I think the facility really, like reflects that. So we just got to get, fucking out of this pandemic.
I know, it's crazy. So, and that's what, and then even when there's like, I can see your place being the spot, like when there's like, events happening in town, like people come in ahead of time and train in there and get warmed up. You know what I mean? Like, and before any kind of different, whatever competitions are going on or whatnot.
Yeah. And I mean, we're also trying to bring like seminars and stuff. Like we had stuff all summer. I had stuff scheduled for this summer. Like I was trying to open and have like, again, like some of my coaches and they're like big names in MMA and stuff like that. Kong Lee and then Lavelle Marshall, who's my Shuai Jiao coach and his coach, Huha out in Inner Mongolia. Like we were going to have some of these people come through. Some people from the Yokao gym in Thailand were going to come. Like we had all this cool stuff set up and then, everything had to cancel. And, but we're trying to make that again, like we're trying to have a good stream of seminars and kind of names coming through that are sharing what they have to offer. And we have like it's almost 4,500 square feet. It's a nice facility. It's big. We can fit a lot of people in there for those workshops. There's like, hotels and stuff right nearby. So like people can come into town and come check it out and stuff like that. Like I'm trying to make it a really happening place. Like I want stuff to happen there. I want people to come out. I want people to do seminars and teach really good Muay Thai or shoot boxing or, BJJ, Sanda, self-defense, inner Mongolian wrestling, like crazy.
The Mongolian wrestling's been kind of getting some traction lately. I've been hearing more and more chatter around that.
Yeah, that's because we've been talking about it.
No. Besides,
that's funny because like
outside of me and you talking or whatever,
Yeah, that's a super rare style, and again, like that's my niche is like
weird
these
shit,
really weird, unheard of styles. But like, the dude that I'm working with is like the leading force in getting that information out into the West. Like, there's been some like, whatever History Channel or Discovery documentaries about going out to Inner Mongolia and wrestling and like. But it's a super rare style. Like it has not left that area like ever. Like nobody teaches it. Nobody does it. That competitions don't happen anywhere else in the world but there. And they're absolute beasts. Like that's one of the craziest wrestling styles. It's another jacketed wrestling style. There's no time limits. There's no weight classes. Like you wrestle outside on the rocks and dirt and stuff. Like, but it's just now, this is like the first time ever that it's really like coming out of Inner Mongolia and sort of into the mainstream is like through this stuff. And like I said, we do a monthly workshop through Zoom with those guys and stuff. So like, we're trying to get it out. Like they have a pretty decent following already. And so we're trying to like, align ourselves with that and have that offering as well. But it's crazy. Like the Inner Mongolian Bokh wrestling, like it's very similar to the Shuai Jiao, the Chinese wrestling that we do. Just with like harder rules and stuff.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is when I was like 16, I went to China. And I went to China not to like learn Kung Fu or anything like that. I went because I wanted to better understand the culture that the arts that I was learning came from. And I just like happened to make it out to Inner Mongolia to like Huhat and ended up going out and into the grasslands after a couple of days and like staying in yurts with these horse farmers that also did this wrestling. And you wear this like crazy leather, like studded jacket. It's like an open chested, like sleeves and back and a belt basically. And like at the time I didn't appreciate it cause I was like, this isn't Kung Fu, something weird, but I did it. Like I just totally fell into that one as well. And just like happened to go out there and like get linked up with the right people to do it. And then I kind of came back and, I didn't appreciate it at the time. And now I'm like, fuck, this stuff is awesome. I wish I had paid more attention. I should have like really, I thought it was like a more common thing because like I'm some fucking random 16-year-old kid from like New Hampshire.
Yeah.
If I could get out there and learn about this stuff, I figured everybody knew about it. And then when I found like, oh, actually this is like super rare. Nobody knows about it. It's like not left the region ever.
Yeah.
Then I kind of regretted it. But now very little, like those guys out there are making moves and are going to continue to make moves. Hopefully that stuff is going to continue to grow in popularity and kind of come out. I'm trying to do it with Sanda. They're doing it with Bokh.
The crazy thing, man, is that years ago, one of my old professors from anthropology days hit me up because they needed someone to go to Mongolia and document. There's like still fragments of like cultures out there or little pieces of like, some tribal areas where they're still untouched by like Western influences. Like they haven't been exposed to like TV or any of that stuff. So they're still living very traditional.
Oh yeah.
And this was years ago. And they were like, hey, we need someone to go to Mongolia, but it's like a 5-year commitment. And, and kind of document all this before it goes away because Western influences are coming in there.
Yep.
And, and not in like the evil Western influences way. It's just that the world's getting smaller and technology's getting cheaper and more available and spread out. You know what I mean? And the most of their Western influence are coming via China. You know what I mean? Like not U.S. exporting shit out there. You know what I mean? Right. But you know what I mean. Even so, whatever. But
Apple and Starbucks isn't like opening a store out in the grasslands quite yet.
But Yahweh or some fucking Chinese company is sending some shit out there, and then they're seeing everything. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think it would have been an awesome job, and they kind of wanted someone a little rough and tumble that could handle being in Mongolia for 5 years, but that was just way fucking crazy of a fucking commitment. You know what I mean? Like, like it's like your 10-year thing on the mountain. I was like,
yeah, that's a commitment.
It would have been cool to be able to do some real traditional like anthropology with like people that have limited exposure to people outside of their own culture. You know what I mean? It would have been cool, but like
it would have been a different world. I mean, it's a different world out there. I mean, I just have a teeny little glimpse of it through like my coaches, the people I've been working with, but it's like they're out there. It is still grasslands. They are still living in yurts. Like they say they have Wi-Fi, but it ain't Wi-Fi like we have Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? And like they're still just like wrestling horses and lifting camels for strength training. Like they're not going to Planet Fitnesses. Like like
they're still hunting with like falcons and shit.
Oh, yeah. like the golden eagles.
Yeah,
like,
the eagles.
Things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, like they still like the three things there is wrestle, ride horses, and shoot bow and arrow. Like archery. Like that's their life.
Yeah. How the hell did you get out to China as a 16-year-old and then not only China, but how did you slither your way over to Mongolia, dude?
Yeah, I mean, saying everything out loud, it sounds so weird, but like I just fall ass backwards into these situations.
Did you go by yourself?
Yeah. So I went. So there was this like program that was like exchange in living or something, like exchange in international living, something like that, where they send people from one part of the country, one part of the world to another part of the world, and not just like U.S. to China, but like France to Japan to Spain, like anything like that. And it's basically like, okay, how do people from this part of the world do in this part of, like, how easy is it for them to go to this part of the world and like communicate and stuff like that. And they link you up with like a bunch of like host families and stuff like that. And like you apply for it and you get to like go out and stuff like that. And I was like a super driven kid and like all about, doing whatever it is that I was doing. And so I applied for this program and I was like, yep, you got it. Like, you're like one of the youngest people ever to do it. And they just like, okay, you're going to like go with these groups and like, you're going to get linked up with these families in these towns. And like,
okay. So there was like a structure to it.
Yeah. There was like they give you resources to go out there. And then like, there was like you could go south or you could go like towards Tibet and you can go north. And I picked north. And I think I ended up like, they send you to like, I flew into Beijing and I did all the like the Great Wall and the Forbidden City kind of stuff. Like there's like these touristy things that they send you to, but then like you meet groups. And when I was there, I met like a group of kids from China that were traveling around China. Like they were from all different parts. And so like they were going to each other's like hometowns and stuff like that to see how they lived. And I ended up like just following them and them being like, oh yeah, you come, like you stay, whatever. Like we're just showing like different people, like where different regions. And so I went to some really fucking rural ass towns and
you were off the beaten path. You weren't on the,
And I went, I think at one point we went to like the Mongolian desert and it was like a big tourist trap. Like, you could ride dune buggies and like get in those giant hamster balls for people and they like roll you down the sand dunes and stuff like that. And I met some people that were like selling goods and I was like, I don't know, just trying to chat them up and whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we're going to like pack up and go into the grasslands. Like if you want to come, you can come and stay in my aunt's yurt or whatever. And I was again, like, I don't understand how I did it. Like at this point, like no 16-year-old should be doing any of this shit. By like today's standards. And I was like, fuck it. Like I'm going to go. And so I just like, I followed them and like, they brought me to this little like town of yurts that raised horses. They had a big barn and they wrestled and shit like that. And I remember I was there for a few days and they were like, oh, there's a bus coming if you want to get back to like Hut or like the main like city or whatever. And then I was like, yeah, maybe I'll take that one. And then they're like, oh, no. This is the only bus going back for another like 3 weeks. So if you want to get back, you go back now. Yeah. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. I'll go back now. And I like found my next contact for like a host family and they're like, yep, come in and, stay here. And like, that was just absolute craziness. Like it was like, it gave you resources and structure, but like, I just went by myself with like and like linked up with these groups and just
that's
like
awesome, man.
Went from one group to another, just like, I don't know, finding different areas to hang out in.
And so something you said it resonates so hard, dude, that like, in this day and age, there's not a lot of 16-year-olds doing that shit, but you can do it. And then, so you have, I feel like, I don't know. And this is like, I don't want to be like, well, when I was a kid, but any of that shit, like I'm not trying to do that, but I mean, that's an important thing that should never get lost, that like kids are more resourceful than people are letting them be now. Yes. So I feel like kids are staying more infantile longer because they're under more protection and watchful eyes than if you just let them fucking go out and experience the fucking world. I'm not saying send your 14-year-old out to fucking Mongolia. I'm just saying that, you know what I mean? Like, like when we were kids, man, we got on our bikes and we went out and we were gone all day. To be home was a punishment. And,
absolutely.
No one was tracking you on cell phones and whatever. Not everyone, but more people than not survived it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, I don't, when I was 16, I didn't go to fucking China, but like, you know, like I would take the bus, me and my friends would take the bus to New York, and then we'd go to shows and then walk around the city and get into shit and fucking
Me too.
try and make you way. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's such an important thing in someone's development, like their character and just like just mental development. Like it's such a sad thing that gets lost nowadays now, and that more people are just staying home and not doing as much. Even if they want to, it's harder nowadays. Like, you know, the shit when we were kids riding around, like people would call child services now. Like if you saw like some 7-year-olds riding bikes, you know, like in the middle.
Really different time. Really different time. I mean, same thing. I used to I lived out in the woods in New Hampshire. I remember taking my dog and just like going and like there was railroad tracks. I was just like walking the railroad tracks by myself, and I was like I don't know, 10, like really young, just like running around, and then I'd get lost, and then I'd tell the dog, all right, go home, and I'd follow the dog back home. And like, because I also remember like my father telling me stories about like when he was a kid, like, I was 8 years old walking around by myself.
Yeah, it was even crazier in our parents' day.
And then, you know, now it's like, I can't imagine like exactly like someone would get, you know, cops called on them if they found out, you're letting your, you know, 8-year-old kid run around in the woods by themselves or like go ride their bikes into town. Like that doesn't happen anymore. Yeah.
I just worry about what that's going to do to like next, you know, not even like the generation that's going through it now, but like a 10-year-old's grandkid. What are they going to be like? You know what I mean? They even going to leave like a 10x10 cubicle ever? You know what I mean? Like who knows? Like, you know what I mean? I feel like that wanderlust and all that experience from being out and living life is such important shit. And there's hard times with it and there's good times with it. And it's like you learn equally from both. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And the hard times become laughs later, usually, you know, unless it's something pretty horrible, but like usually later it's like, oh, that sucked so fucking bad. But you know, you look back with it on a fondness, you know what I mean?
People don't struggle through things like that as much anymore. And it definitely sort of changes that kind of like development or like having, you know, a little more freedom in that sense, a little bit younger, having to go through kind of like hard times like that, like bad situations or whatever.
Overcoming shit, man.
Yeah, it makes a big difference in
teaches you shit, man.
Yeah. And we definitely don't see that as much now. And like, like, I don't know, like the generation coming up is living in a very different time. Like, I think there's like a meme going around right now that's I keep chuckling at because it keeps popping up. That was like, it's like someone saying like, oh, what are we supposed to do if schools don't go back from the pandemic? Just leave our kids home all day while we're at work. And then it was like the little puppet. It was like kids from the 80s and 90s or parents from the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And like kind of like
doing the look to the side.
The look to the side. Oh, we kind of did that.
Yeah,
like, the
absolutely.
80s were a little bit different. Like letting your kids kind of like, well, you know, figure it out until I get home from work, you know?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And you don't see that as much.
There was
anymore.
days I'd come home and the house was locked and it's like, you know what I mean? And it's like, I didn't get in until someone else was home, you know? And I'd go do shit, man. Like, you
walk to and from like my school, like totally by myself at a young age. And you know, like I'd get home and nobody would be there, but I like knew how to take care of myself at that point. Like it's just like it's definitely a weird thing. And it's weird to, you know, I don't know. I can't even guess what kind of repercussions that change is going to have. And, you know, the generation following that might have a totally different situation where, you know, everything's plugged into some grand monitor that, you know, or it might go back the other way. And,
who knows?
You know,
right now, you know, or it'll be fucking Mad Max times. Who knows? You know what I mean? Then you're going to learn from a young age to get shit done. But
it could be that too. It might not be the worst thing in the world.
Lesson learned. If you're a parent right now and you got like a 14-year-old, don't be a fucking helicopter hovering around. Let the kid fucking breathe a little bit.
Yeah, send them to Mongolia.
Yeah, send them to Mongolia. They'll fucking learn some shit. But dude, how can people find out more about your gym and you know, the programs that you got going on and what you're up to and whatnot?
All our social, all our websites, all the same. So Sanda, Sanda, fightingarts.com. Sanda_fighting_arts on Instagram. Sanda Fighting Arts on Facebook. And my personal Instagram is Coach Tye Tonkin. But you know, if you search Sanda Fighting Arts in Google, all of our stuff, you know, pops up. Because again, we're one of only a few Sanda gyms around. So
How have the other gyms reacted to your opening? It must be, and I don't want to, I'm not trying to lead, but is it something where it's so small that like whenever there's something new, everyone's rallies behind it and is stoked on it? Or is there like weirdness like with that stuff?
I mean, so far I've gotten a ton of support. Like I have very strategically and very purposely like kind of flew under the radar for like, cause there's a lot of drama in anything you get into, music or bikes or cars or, you know, sports of any kind. And, we're like just different enough and like not crossing over as much into other things where like we kind of can just do our own thing and stay in our own lane. But like I know a handful of other gym owners in the area and have like good relationships with them. And like as I've developed and because I've taken my time with it, like I've been very open, like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And I'm doing something that nobody else is. So no one's like, oh, you're, you know,
stepping on any
toes for anything like that. And it's something totally different. So everybody's been super stoked on it. And, you know, there's a few people that like done Sanda back in the day. And so they're like, wow, this is awesome. Like that was my background. I can't believe there's a Sanda gym opening up again. That's super cool. And like people have been super supportive of it. So yeah, it's like, it's like I say, it's like the lane next to everybody else. We're all going kind of in the same direction, but I have something just different enough that like people have been.
Oh, I mean, like the other Sanda schools around the country, you said there's not a lot of them, so they must be somewhat stoked that there's something.
Yeah, like I think like we've got, you know, some of the better representation. Like I said, we really push to have like a good social media presence and stuff like that. And for the most part, like the few folks that are good Sanda fighters and as like things, like I said, in the UFC starts to pick up a little bit and things like that, we've gotten more and more like really positive messages of just like, oh, it's so great. I can't believe there's a Sanda gym or a Sanda account that's like this. And again, like that's where a lot of like, there's Sanda gyms and owners and stuff from other parts of the country and other countries that are, you know, message us all the time. Wow, this is amazing. You have an amazing facility. I'd love to come train. Like, So it's good. Like it's been nothing but support. You know, just gotta make it out of this and sort of see where the cards lie as we push forward.
The one other question too I had this, you know, it seems like with the Sanda, like there's like, do the traditional, like the more old school traditional guys, are they behind like, you know, the lane? Do you know where I'm going at with this? Like, do they want to keep it so traditional, or do they like kind of embrace like the growth of it and the spreading out of it into like more of like the MMA type world, for lack of a better word?
It's really funny. Like traditional folks want to stay very traditional.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people that kind of like give the side eye to Sanda because they feel like it's like cheapening something that they're doing. Like, oh, well, this stuff would have taken years to develop this skill. And like, that's kind of like it's a sport. And, you know, you're kind of like selling out, so to speak. But the community at large is always talking about like applicability. Like, oh, can you really do this stuff? And like the guys that are doing Sanda are doing those principles more, you know, realistically. And there's a lot of people that aren't, that are just doing the traditional thing. So like what they say they want out of like Chinese martial arts and what they're actually supporting on that side is really funny. Cause like, in my opinion, like I'm trying to I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to take my traditional and I'm going to adapt it into Sanda and I'm going to mix those two and show the world that this stuff is applicable and you can use it as a good combat sport. And that's what everybody's kind of saying they need to do. All traditional people need to be able to actually fight. But, you know, here I am trying to do it. And like the real old school traditional folks are like, kind of look down on that. Even though it's what they want, they still look down on it. And like, maybe later on, you know, they'll kind of give way. Cause like, I don't package it as Kung Fu and Tai Chi wrestling. It's, you know, it's kickboxing and wrestling. Like it's, that's what I teach. And you know, the terminology and how a class runs and we're not wearing like robes and shit anymore is just, that shit's got to go so that the arts can grow.
Yeah. Because, you know, if you wanted to teach more of just the traditional, you could do some traditional classes and then you could do some more mixed classes or whatever, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it's
you could do Sanda or like Northern Fist or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's all there.
Yeah.
It's all just how you package something, and it's about the training. That's really what it comes down. That's what anything comes down to. And we could talk for days about this style and that style.
Yeah.
That shit doesn't really matter. It's the person, it's the practitioner, and it's how you train and the training methods to get you there.
Yeah.
And whether you package it as a traditional martial art or a combat sport or kickboxing or whatever, it should all be within the same realm. It shouldn't make a difference. You know, people just get too caught up on like the names of something or the look of something. And it's like, if you timing, speed, reaction, angle, footwork, you know, strength conditioning, endurance, all of that stuff doesn't matter what you're doing. Like if you're not doing that in traditional stuff, then no, your shit's not going to work.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that in combat sport, your shit's not going to work.
Yeah.
So what really matters is the end result, which is like the applicability. You got to be able to fight, and you got to be able to put your stuff to some kind of a test. And so we're not getting people that are interested in doing that as much in the traditional stuff. We haven't for years. There's some, but not a lot. And we're kind of losing out to like the more modern MMA, like we were talking about earlier. So, it's all the same stuff though.
I just was wondering. I didn't hit on it earlier. What more of some of the more traditional master takes might have been on that? You know what I mean? And it was just just something that was.
Yeah, they don't like it. Yeah, they don't like it because it's not the way they did it. But clearly, the way they did it isn't helping pass it on as much.
So Sanda's the punk rock of traditional martial arts.
Exactly. I like it that way. Like, it might ruffle some feathers of like kind of the old guard, so to speak. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like that's what you wanted. That's what you said you wanted. It's just I'm doing it my way and not your way, and like it's.
But at the end of the day, too, if you've already proven yourself with the old guard and done the things their way, and then. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I mean, that's why I come from a traditional background, and I still have it. Like I said, like that's why I went out to the fucking mountain. Like, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't like cheapening that training. If like that's what I'm representing, like I can say, yes, I really did put my time in the traditional ways, and I saw what that had to offer and how they're training and what's applicable and maybe what's not working so much anymore. And like. I'm not just saying that this, that, or the other thing doesn't work. I've done it, and I've been there, and I really know it, and I know this side of things, and I want to bridge those two worlds. And like I said, like the old guard might not like it, but it is also what they say they want out of it.
And I'm sure some of the new guard doesn't like some of the traditional stuff, but they got to get those fundamentals down too to really push things forward.
Well, I package it in a way where like. They don't know what they're doing, right? And they come in, they start hitting a bag, throwing punches and kicks and hitting pads, getting in the ring, and then all of a sudden they see out of the corner, like, what the fuck? This dude's flipping a cinder block and like catching What the fuck? This guy's like beating himself with a stick. Like, what is that? What's going on over there? And then you kind of like you pull them in a little bit, right? Or like you get something with a little bit of like fancy skill. Yeah. How to get like more sensitivity, and like they're like, whoa, I can't read your body movement, or like I can't figure out what you're doing. And you go, oh, well, that's this like little thing from like the White Crane, like soft power and things like that. And that like gets them interested. So you got to trick everybody into training, whether it's one way in or from the other side in. Like, so I'm like I said, I'm trying to make that bridge for both and kind of get the best of both worlds.
Oh, fuck yeah, man. And if anyone's in the greater Boston area, do yourself a favor and hit up Tye and go check out Sanda Fighting Arts in Watertown, Massachusetts.
Come on in.
Fuck yeah, man. I want to thank you for coming out today, and we're going to shut this off here, but I'm going to probably need you to send me like the spelling of some of those, like the wrestling shit and stuff. Like, you know what I mean? I know Sanda is pretty easy, but some of that other stuff, like I was like, I'm going to be butchering that in the fucking show notes. But yeah, man, let's talk soon. I mean, obviously we always fucking hang out, but it was just good to have you on, man.
Thank you, man.
And
Thank you. Really
everyone should go check out that facility. And even if you're not local and you're not traveling right now, go check it out at SandaFightingArts.com.
Throw you around, throw some punches and kicks at you, and show you some unique shit.
And then maybe you can have them do it. If you're not local, you can have them do a Zoom class with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Check us out, man. We got offerings all over the place.
All right. Fuck yeah, bro.